Pumping is a core part of the NICU mom's experience, especially when a child is born very early. In my case, pumping was a 6 month journey, 4 months during the NICU stay, and 2 months of transition at home. And towards the end of it, I was just so sick and tired of it. Hi and welcome. This is Never Too Early. Today, I'm sharing what that journey actually looked like from the first 10 milliliter bottle to draining 15.5 liter of liquid gold down the drain a year later. I had incredible help from lactation specialists throughout the journey. They were always there to guide me when things get a little confusing around pumping and breastfeeding. But it was still a challenging journey and it was physically painful at times. The pumping machines at the hospital were Medela Symphony, and the rental machine I had at home was the same, so the experience was consistent. The hospital provided daily disposable pumping sets with all the parts to reduce the risk of contamination for preemies. And there was this area in the NICU where moms could pick up these pumping sets and milk collection bottles and all the other pumping supplies. There was even these free notebooks for logging the pumping history, like a breast milk diary, so to say. And as a big journaling person, I really took it seriously, and this is how they looked. So my pumping routine looked like this, both at the hospital and at home. I pumped every 2 to 3 hours, all day and all night, and I had to label every bottle, record the amount, and place them on the collection desk in the NICU room. When pumping at home, I had to store the milk in the refrigerator and transport it to the hospital using an ice bag. On the collection desk in our shared NICU room, there was a laminated sheet of paper where you would write down the amount of milk you're turning in. And in the first week, as a new mom, I was so proud of myself and excited to turn in 10 to 20 milliliter in these tiny little bottles. And I saw the mom at the next incubator bringing 1200 milliliter. It felt a bit like an open dashboard for a competitive sport. In this case, who produced more breast milk? I wasn't even really trying to compare myself, but next to this big number, my tiny little bottles looked, or I felt, very small. But that was my reality, and I had to laugh off and move forward. By the way, I had never really reached that kind of level. When I heard about power pumping for the first time, it did sound big and scary. Regular pumping was already a lot, so I thought, what more can I even do than this? The lactation specialist nurses constantly monitored the amount of breast milk I produced, and at some point, they suggested I try power pumping so that I could produce enough to feed my baby entirely when the time comes. Power pumping is an additional interval pumping session which takes about an hour, a couple of times a day, on top of your regular pumping schedule. A regular pumping session has a few steps: assembling the pumping kit, prepping the machine and yourself, pumping, labeling the bottles, washing the kit, and putting things in place, which takes about 40 to 45 minutes in total, 8 to 10 times a day. That becomes a 6 to 7 hour per day job. If you add power pumping, it adds an additional 1.5 to 2 hours a day, which makes pumping a serious full time job. And that doesn't even include packing, transporting, or cleaning the machine. It is massive work on top of everything else you're handling during your NICU stay, like commuting, taking care of your baby, skin to skin sessions, and all the administrative work. For this reason, I couldn't imagine going back to work soon after giving birth like many moms in the US do. Pumping alone is a mind blowing amount of work already. We started training for breastfeeding as soon as my baby was able at around week 8. It wasn't really about feeding yet, it was about getting him used to the instinct. The specialist told me it was also vital for exchanging bacteria from my body to help his immune system. It took many weeks to reach a meaningful stage where he was able to take a bottle for feeding. When we finally came home, we brought 10 liters of processed breast milk of mine from the hospital with us. Our fridge stayed full from all the milk we brought from the hospital and the additional milk that kept adding up. Initially at home, it was a mix of breastfeeding, defrosted stored milk, and fresh pumping. I was so worried about nipple confusion, but my baby ended up never even using a pacifier. We eventually transitioned to full breastfeeding in a few weeks after coming home. It made life so much easier. I was so happy to be off that Medela machine after being attached to it for like 6 months. But there was also a sad part. I tried to use the stored milk in various ways, but eventually I had to throw 15.5 liters away a year later. We just couldn't use it all before it expired. It was so sad to drain down that liquid gold, but on the flip side, it meant I was producing more than enough for my baby. Also, it was time to close that chapter and move on to the next stage. I want to mention a couple of things for those in the middle of NICU pumping. First, pain and discomfort. Use a nipple balm and cooling bags designed for this purpose. Make sure your flange size matches your nipple size and know that your size will change over time. Second, ask for help. Don't be shy about asking the lactation specialist at your NICU for advice. They have the knowledge and resources and are very happy to help you. Third, you are a superhero. Producing milk is a superpower that mothers newly acquired after giving birth. It is a miracle that you can keep a little person alive and growing entirely on what your body makes. So let's be proud. Pumping is a wonderful bridge to reach the very special bonding experience of breastfeeding. And of course, if you cannot breastfeed for any reason, we are living in a time where we can navigate the next best option. So we are all very lucky in that sense. I was so glad to be in Germany where motherhood is natural and well protected. I was able to take time and focus on all these early motherhood experience, especially feeding my own baby, which is a full-time job of its own without having to juggle work or other large tasks at hand. Of course, everyone's experience is different, but I really think the society should give way more credit to women in their postpartum. We as women should also recognize that for ourselves and respect our bodies instead of overlooking the natural process of recovery and change, especially if you are a NICU mom. I hope this episode gave you an outlook on the journey or at least some companionship. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next episode. This is Never Too Early.